start with the Citizens' Wealth Fund, right? So here's what happens every time there's a financial crisis, which is basically every decade, and they get bigger every time, is that anyone with money gets bailed out, and anybody who lives on wages gets stuffed. What's remarkable about this crisis, in Europe at least, is how they've done the wage furloughs. Basically, they've done one of the things that we talk about, helicopter money. Rather than making people unemployed and doing this weird thing through the central bank called quantitative easing, why not just mail people checks to keep the economy whole so that when the crisis passes, then they're back to work? And in fact, this has proven to be remarkably successful. So one of the things that we talk about, helicopter money, is already been done because of the COVID crisis. But the big one that we've got is this. Every time there's a financial crisis, the investor classes, the top 20% who own all the stocks and shares, dump them. And what do they want, and what do their institutions want? They want to buy government debt. Why? Because that's a safe asset. The government's not going to go bankrupt if it's got a printing press or it's reasonably well run, like Ireland. Whereas a firm can go bankrupt, and you don't want to be caught with worthless paper. So what happens every time this occurs is central banks, whether it's the Bank of England or whether it's the ECB or particularly the Fed in America, they come along and they buy all those assets. They're basically putting a floor under how far those assets can go. And that encourages investors to come back in. It's basically saying we've got capitalism, but nobody ever has to take a loss. Now that's just a ridiculous way of running the shop, right? On the other side, meanwhile, if you're dependent on labour income, you've got nothing, particularly if you live in the US. So we say, why on earth are we doing this? Why don't we get the government in the form of the central bank to come in and actually buy those equities? Don't just put a floor under their prices through all this fancy monetary policy. Just buy the bloody things. Put them into a big passive fund. What that means is you buy them all, you put them in a box, and you basically get an independent board that knows how to do investment to basically run these things for the next 10 to 15 years. And then what happens is so-called equities, stocks and shares, basically give you a payoff after inflation of between 4 and 6% a year. You compound that for 15 years. If you did that with 20% of GDP in a crisis, you would have literally, in the case of the United States, trillions of dollars. You haven't taxed a single person to generate this wealth. You've done it simply because the government's cost of borrowing goes down in a crisis. The private sector goes up. You buy all this stuff. You let basically nature take its course over the next 15 to 20 years. You would have trillions of dollars to redistribute to the bottom 80% of the population, the ones who don't have assets. And that gives them a claim on the national wealth. It makes them asset holders. It gives them a stake in the game. Rather than regarding them as a social problem to be managed, you're actually saying to your fellow citizens, this is your wealth, and we're collectively managing it. So we all have a stake in how the society grows and how it's run. And we think that's incredibly important. And societies such as like Ireland are exactly the right size to do this. They have enough trust and transparency that you can actually make this work on a basis and really change the lives of people, whether it's through financing public housing, something that's badly needed in Ireland, whether it's through bolstering the medical sector, whether it's through doing more for higher education and skills. You could do it, and we could, in a sense, earn the money in a good capitalist way that keeps the economy going, but then redistributes way more than you could ever do through taxes.
If in the 1980s we'd invested the revenues from North Sea oil, the UK could have had a fund worth over £500 billion today. But instead, the returns were spent in one generation. We shouldn't make the same mistake again. The proceeds from things like the sale of 5G should be shared between citizens and between generations. An example of what you can do with the income from a Citizens' Wealth Fund is make sure everyone can start their adult life with an inheritance. Think what you could have done or could do with £10,000 at the age of 25. Study, start a business, or put it towards a house. Having wealth is a powerful thing. It brings security and opportunity, and it shouldn't be down to luck of birth. A Citizens' Wealth Fund would transform a portion of our national wealth into public wealth so that everyone can have a stake in the economy.